Hello and welcome back to the MMA Bar. Today we're going to discuss one of the most prominent UFC fighters in history, Chuck Liddell. His career, scandals, his success in the UFC, and what makes him such a big name in the sport. When someone is as influential as Chuck the Iceman Liddell, there's bound to be info that not even diehard UFC fans know. The former UFC light heavyweight champion and UFC Hall of Fame inductee was the face of MMA for quite a while at one point in his career. His presence was only built further when he became the first coach on Season 1 of The Ultimate Fighter. The two winners of the inaugural season were both from his team. Liddell has had classic bouts with some of the toughest opponents to step into the octagon. Some of his most iconic fights were with the likes of other legends like Randy Couture and Tito Ortiz. Fans may be craving to learn more about the Iceman, and there's still plenty more to find out. But first, let's delve into the early life and career of the legend. Chuck Liddell was born on December 17, 1969 in Santa Barbara, California. He was raised by his single mother and maternal grandfather who taught Liddell and his siblings boxing techniques from a very young age. Liddell began studying Koei-kan karate at the age of 12. The tattoo on his scalp reads Koei-kan. Liddell was excellent at different sports. He was a 4-year starter on the football team at his high school, playing center and linebacker. He also excelled at wrestling. He holds an amateur kickboxing record of 20 wins and 2 losses, with 16 of his wins coming by way of knockout. When Liddell started his mixed martial arts career, he began to train in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu under John Lewis in Las Vegas, Nevada. Though he is now retired from fighting, his nickname was the Iceman. During his fighting days, he trained out of John Hackelman's The Pit and fought for the UFC in their light heavyweight division. Chuck Liddell was about two things throughout his MMA career: stuffing takedowns and knocking people out. He had world-class power in both hands and some of the best takedown defense that the 205-pound division has ever witnessed. Joe Rogan called Liddell a destroyer who would win fights before they even began because people were afraid of his devastating power. To go along with his power, Liddell also boasted a nearly unbreakable chin. In his prime, Dana White said you could hit Chuck with a steel bar and not knock him out. Liddell used these skills to rule over the division during a golden era of mixed martial arts. Although Liddell trained in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, he rarely used it to take someone down. Originally managed by Dana White himself, Chuck Liddell made his debut in the UFC. Liddell defeated Noe Hernandez in his MMA debut at UFC 17 by decision. 2 fights later, he was defeated by Jeremy Horn via arm triangle choke. After that loss, he went on a 10-fight winning streak that saw Kevin Randleman, Guy Mezger, Jeff Monson, Murilo Bustamante, Amar Suloev, Vitor Belfort, and Renato Sobral all fall to him. Around the end of that streak is when the Tito Ortiz problem began to surface. From 2000 to 2002, Tito Ortiz was the UFC's big-ticket item. His powerful wrestling and ground-and-pound tactics hit a chord with fight fans everywhere. That said, Liddell eventually emerged as the #1 contender to Ortiz's light heavyweight crown. Due to what he deemed to be a friendship, Ortiz refused to fight the Iceman. Liddell, however, didn't seem to feel the same warmth toward Ortiz. He wanted his shot at the title. Eventually, the UFC put together an interim title fight between Randy Couture and Liddell when Ortiz continually refused to take him on. Most believe that Couture was washed up when these two outstanding mixed martial artists met at UFC 43. But Couture proved the naysayers wrong by way of a third-round TKO victory over Liddell. After this loss to Couture at UFC 243, Liddell traveled to Japan to fight in Pride's middleweight Grand Prix, a single elimination contest. UFC President Dana White was so confident that Liddell would take home the title from the rival organization that he reportedly placed a large bet on him. Unfortunately for White, when the Iceman met up with Quinton Rampage Jackson in the second round of the tournament, he succumbed by second-round TKO. Regardless, losses do not explain the legend of Chuck Liddell. Rather, it was the spirit and the determination he used to overcome challenges. After losing to Rampage Jackson, Chuck came back to the UFC and the bad blood between him and Ortiz was finally settled at UFC 47. In the fight, Ortiz did not implement his usual game plan of takedowns and ground and pound, instead preferring to strike with his adversary. Liddell eventually unleashed a terrific flurry on him, scoring a second-round KO victory. Later in a rematch at UFC 66, Ortiz would attempt to implement his normal game plan against the then-champ to no avail. He fell again by TKO in round 3. This serves as one of the great rivalries in MMA history. Also, Liddell avenged his loss against Couture with a first-round KO of him at UFC 52 and a second-round KO again at UFC 57. The first of Liddell's victories over Couture came after the two had served as coaches on The Ultimate Fighter 1. It also finally netted him the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship, a title that he would hold for 4 consecutive fights following that. In his 5th defense, it was Rampage Jackson who beat him when he ventured to Pride that once again beat him at UFC 71 and took his UFC championship. When Pride fell, Rampage came to the UFC, and despite Liddell being on a solid win streak, it just happened that Rampage had his number. Liddell was knocked down by a right hook less than 2 minutes into the first round and was unable to defend himself against Jackson's strikes on the ground, resulting in a knockout victory for Jackson. After the loss, Liddell was widely criticized after reports indicated he had been seen in nightclubs the week before the event. In one of his last fights in MMA, Liddell faced undefeated wrestler Rashad Evans. Most people thought that if Liddell's fight against Rashad Evans at UFC 88 stayed standing, Evans was in trouble. Not so. With one of the greatest knockout punches in UFC history, Evans dropped his opponent with a damaging right hand that left him out cold, making Liddell's road to regaining the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship belt he lost to Kenton Jackson at UFC 71 much more difficult. In 2009, Liddell was inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. Dana White stated that "I don't want him to fight, he wants to, so we'll see what happens." 2 days later, Liddell went on record to say that he was undecided on the matter and that it's hard for an athlete to quit what he's done his whole life. Liddell decided to end his fighting career on December 29, 2010 after 3 straight knockout losses, with the last coming against Rich Franklin. At UFC 125 press conference in December of 2010, Liddell announced his retirement and indicated that he would be taking the position of Vice President of Business Development within the UFC. He did so after prompting from Dana White, amongst others. In 2013, during an interview on the Opie and Anthony show, Liddell stated that there was a possibility of one last comeback similar to George Foreman. Apparently, Liddell had one more fight in him. Liddell announced in April of 2018 that he was coming out of retirement to target a 3rd fight with Tito Ortiz. The fight took place on November 24, 2018 under Oscar De La Hoya's Golden Boy Promotions. Liddell lost the fight via knockout in the first round. It was during his era that the UFC really started to become popular, and Liddell became its biggest star. Liddell's popularity had peaked by the time Liddell fought his rematch opposite Ortiz at UFC 66. In 2007, Liddell appeared on the cover of ESPN The Magazine, being the first UFC fighter to do so. Liddell was starting to become a serious crossover star, and he would make frequent public and television appearances. He'd gain rockstar-like celebrity, and when he wasn't fighting, he'd party like one. Tito's assertion that Liddell had become an alcoholic may not have been true, but Liddell certainly liked to drink, and as Dana White put it, he wasn't living the lifestyle of a professional athlete. More than just cultivating his success, I don't think it's a stretch to say that Liddell was instrumental in bringing about the success of UFC, Dana White, Tap Out, and many other people within the MMA business. As for his legacy as a fighter, he was certainly the greatest of his time, and I do feel that his losses late in his career have as much to do with the improvement in the overall talent involved in MMA. On March 3, 2020, Liddell announced in a TMZ interview that he has retired from mixed martial arts again. Although he has rumored coming back to compete in bare-knuckle bouts, he has not fought since then. Thanks for watching this video. That's all for now. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell.